Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to break down a really fascinating psychological study that gets to the heart of a hidden trigger for depression. And you know what? It all revolves around one incredibly powerful and often fragile idea: honor.
But before we dive in, let me ask you something. Just take a second and think about it. What's the one thing you would absolutely defend no matter what? For some of us, it might be family or integrity, maybe our principles. But for a lot of people, that thing is their reputation, their good name. And that's exactly where our story kicks off today.
Okay, so let's get on the same page with a key concept here. It's called a culture of honor. Now, what the source material tells us is that in these cultures, your reputation isn't just some nice-to-have bonus. No, it's something you are basically obligated to protect, even if it means being aggressive about it. Just think of it as a fundamental piece of who you are, something that has to be defended at all costs.
So that brings us to this really tough, long-standing puzzle that has had researchers scratching their heads for years. And that's the troubling link between these honor cultures and suicide rates.
I mean, the data is pretty stark. For decades now, psychologists have seen this pattern where states in the US with a strong honor culture, we're talking mainly in the South and the West, also have consistently higher rates of suicide. And the massive question has always been, why? What is going on here?
So, how do you even begin to explain that? Well, the most obvious place to look is depression, right? It's a huge risk factor for suicide. So the logical next question is, are people in these honor cultures just more depressed? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is way more complicated than you'd think.
And this is where things get really interesting, because you see this contradiction. On one hand, you've got a study from 2011 that found, at an individual level, holding honor values is linked to depression. Okay, makes sense. But then, a few years later, another study comes along and finds that when you zoom out and look at the whole state, these honor states actually don't have higher overall rates of depression. So, what's the deal? It's clear that just blaming depression doesn't solve our puzzle.
And this is exactly where the new research we're talking about today steps in. It introduces a brand new clue, a critical piece of the puzzle. And it's a concept we've already touched on: a person's reputation. Or at least, how they perceive their reputation.
So the researchers came at this from a totally new angle. They thought, okay, what if valuing honor isn't the problem itself? What if it only becomes a risk when something specific happens? You know, when that thing you're supposed to be protecting with your life, your reputation, is suddenly under attack.
And boom, that is the central idea they decided to test. The theory is that for someone who is really focused on honor, taking a hit to their social standing, feeling like they've failed or that their reputation is shot, could be the exact trigger, the specific spark that ignites depressive symptoms.
Now, to figure something like this out, you can't just take a snapshot in time. It doesn't work that way. You need to see how things develop and change. So that's what the researchers did. They designed a study to actually track people's mental health over a period of time.
And this just shows you how simple but brilliant their study design was. So back in June of 2021, they got a baseline. They measured how much people cared about honor and how they felt about their personal and their family's reputation. Then they waited. 2 months later, they checked in again, but this time they also measured for depressive symptoms to see what, if anything, had changed.
The whole investigation started with 305 people who participated online. That gave the researchers a really solid group to follow and analyze over those crucial 2 months.
So, did the theory pan out? Did they find the trigger? Well, this brings us to the big reveal of our explainer today, the solution to the puzzle.
So, first things first, the researchers actually confirmed what that earlier study found. If you just look at the raw data, there was no direct, straight line connecting how much a person cared about honor and whether they had symptoms of depression. So valuing honor by itself wasn't the problem.
But this is the real question, isn't it? What happens when you slice the data differently? When you separate the participants into two groups, the ones who feel like their reputation is solid and the ones who feel like it's been damaged.
And this is it. This is the moment where everything just clicks. For the people who had a high perceived reputation, valuing honor had basically no effect on their future depression. It was like their good name was a kind of protective shield. But, and this is the whole key, for those who felt their reputation was low or damaged, that's when valuing honor became a strong predictor of higher depressive symptoms just 2 months later. It's like honor is the fuel just sitting there, but a damaged reputation, that's the spark.
And get this, it didn't even matter what kind of reputation was damaged.
Whether people felt their own personal reputation took a hit or their family's reputation did, the psychological impact was exactly the same, which is a really powerful finding all on its own.
So, okay, we've solved this psychological puzzle, but why does that actually matter in the real world? What's the so what?
Well, here's the bottom line. What this research shows us is that for people who really value honor, a damaged reputation isn't just an embarrassing moment. It's a serious mental health risk factor. It helps us get past this simplistic idea that, oh, people who care about honor are just more depressed. It's not that simple. The connection is so much more complex. It's about the toxic interaction between their core values and their social standing.
And, this really brings us to the ultimate goal here. The authors themselves say it best. The hope is that by understanding this very specific trigger, we can actually build better, smarter suicide prevention efforts. If we know that a hit to someone's reputation is a major red flag, maybe we can find ways to step in and help before they ever reach a crisis point.
Which kind of leaves us with this final, much bigger question to chew on. This study is just a perfect illustration of how deeply our social world and our inner mental health are connected. And it really makes you wonder, right? In a world that is so full of judgment, how do we build a sense of self that's resilient enough to handle the inevitable hits our reputations are going to take? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.